Thank you for inviting me, and lovely to see everybody here. My own screen of me is all fragmented, maybe just as well I can't see my own face. Great. Right. Okay. So this little book then, How the Wisdom of the Ages is Reflected in Many World Faiths. This came about very unexpectedly when the Theosophical Society of England invited me to produce a series of seminars for, well, newcomers really, attending Theosophical summer schools. And what I had to say at the time was, well, look, I've only got basic understanding of Theosophy. I've got the diploma. I know much, much more about world religions. So would you like me to try and do something with that? And they said, yes, that sounds a great idea. So I said, well, I tell you what I'll do. I will choose 3 easy topics. They're not easy, really. These are 3 things that I think everybody wants to try and understand. So what do we mean by the word God, or the absolute, the oneness, the divine? What on earth is it? What does Theosophy have to say? What do world religions have to say, or some of them? And then I thought, okay, reincarnation or rebirth, that's a fascinating topic. Theosophy's got a fair bit to say about that. We know of certain religions that'll have something to say about it, but there are some religions that surely don't go there. Well, hang on, we're in for a few surprises. And then last of all, and I may not have time to get into this in depth, but we've got somebody with us who is an authority, and that of course is Tim. I know that Tim has spent a lifetime researching into death and life beyond death. So I've touched on that as well. So I'm going to begin with, what does Theosophy share with us? What are the essential teachings then about what some people call God? And I find that word, by the way, problematic. It does conjure up some difficulties. Okay, Theosophy, I believe, calls it the oneness, all right? And in essence, it says this: humankind is essentially a spirit, a unit of, but inseparable from the all-pervading spirit which energizes all matter. Okay, let's hang on to that. Now then, this spirit has been recognized by all the great religions under the name of God, which I say causes a problem. God, or maybe the divine is a better word. Now then, if we go into the world of science, we know exciting things are happening, and the world of science is unraveling lots of secrets of the world of matter, from sub-atom to galaxy, and it's beginning to move towards this idea of oneness, the unity of existence. Very exciting. Science is beginning to catch up. Now then, as human beings gain inner self-knowledge, they will realize their identity with this universal essence. It's very difficult, isn't it, to find words to describe what on earth do we mean by God. It is, it's a problem. Now then, when one begins to understand what this is all about, mystics, and I've always been interested and fascinated by mystics of the great faiths, they talk about liberation, illumination. It's like a light has been switched on. Suddenly I understand what this is all about. Now, esoteric philosophy teaches that the one life pervades the whole of visible nature, and that the total universe, or the cosmos, I like that word, the cosmos, includes invisible modes of being which are animated by the one life. Now, in essence, I think that is what Theosophy says. We'll see if somebody pulls me up on it at the end. But that's my understanding anyway. Okay, now, when I was studying theology many, many moons ago, and in those days, it was always the Abrahamic faiths, but particularly Judeo-Christian theology was the main thing. But remarkably, I was given the opportunity to choose a religion outside of the Abrahamic traditions. And for some reason, I chose Sanatan Dharma, Hinduism. I didn't know anything about it. It had never been taught in school, and I thought, I'm going to explore this. And it wasn't easy to get hold of anything in those days. There was no internet or anything. Anyway, okay. Now then, you Theosophists will know that Hinduism is a very powerful influence or energy within the teachings of what came from Madame Blavatsky. So let's remind ourselves, shall we, of what does Hinduism share with us? Okay, we've got the Rig Veda, one of the oldest scriptures in the world, and talks about the one life that is recognized as transcending all human categories. And so it's designated by an impersonal term. It's not given a gender, very wise, but it sounds a bit rude, but it isn't. So it's referred to as it or that. However, this it or that, this God thing, has many attributes and functions, and is therefore called by a variety of different names. Now, anyone who comes in contact with Hinduism for the first time will be bewildered by this incredible pantheon of all sorts of deities with heaven knows how many arms and so on and so forth. Now, what on earth is that all about? Okay. There's one word that is very, very important. You'll have heard this before, Brahman. Brahman. This is the universal soul. It's uncreated. It's limitless. It's all embracing. And it is eternal. It has always been, and it always will be. And it underlies all existence and animates all living beings. And within the innermost self of each individual, there is something called Atman. And Atman is the subtle essence of Brahman. Now, what is Atman? Well, it's different from the personality. It's different from the self. It is nothing less than the eternal within us. Now, I found this incredibly exciting when I came across it. It is a constant amidst the ever-changing activities of the universe. It's the invisible, it's the subtle essence that is the spirit of the whole universe. And I am part of it. Wow. I tell you, when I came across that, it blew me away, because my background in the Christian religion, and you will all have been taught the Lord's Prayer, to me caused confusion. Let's remind ourselves, because I'm going to go into this in a minute. Our Father, who art in heaven. I've just got to share that line with you. And what on earth does that conjure up in the mind of a child or an adult? Our Father, which art in heaven. So is God a man? And where is heaven? And wait a minute, it's separate from me? It's somewhere out there, up there? Well, Hinduism has just told me, it's within me. It's within you. It's in the whole of nature. It's in every sentient being. Wow. And we are part of it. So this is exciting. Okay, let's go on. Now then, when a person begins to realize this, and the realization of the identity and the unity of Atman and Brahman, suddenly little lights go on, and Hindus call this Moksha. Moksha. This is the moment when a person begins to be freed from the restraints of the mind and the body, and begins to transcend in their thinking processes. This is very, very exciting. But of course, you and I, we can talk about this and go round in circles academically, but do we realize it? Have we experienced it? Have any of us here this afternoon? There are 31 people here this afternoon. Have any of us actually experienced this? A sense of being part of some great, ever-expanding intelligence that permeates everything that exists, and we're all linked? Wow, that's pretty mind-blowing. Well, we have various scriptures in the Hindu tradition that give us clues. So we have the Chandogya Upanishad, likens the learning process like crossing an ocean of suffering. Yes, I think I can agree with that. There's a great deal of suffering in this dimension where we get lost, we get bogged down, we lose hope, we can't see where we're going. We enter into phases of despair. That's the human condition. It ain't easy, folks. It's not easy being here. It's hard, right? The Upanishads, as we know, were composed from about the 6th century BCE onwards. And they talk about something they call a cosmic spirit, which is infinite, creative, benevolent, and deathless. Wow, there's some powerful words there. I like that. And it's the final transcendent truth, and it's the ultimate consciousness which animates all conscious beings. And it's a vast, ageless ocean of which everything that is experienced is only a wave. We are but a speck, but we are part of it. Now that's Hinduism. Okay, I mentioned earlier on the Lord's Prayer in English. And any of you who may have studied any of this in a little more depth will realize that the Christian church, particularly the Western church, have lost something here. Or have they deliberately hidden it? Are there mistranslations? Something has gone very wrong. Now, whilst I was putting this little book together, I got in touch with Dr. Neil Douglas Klotz. And Neil has done amazing work on the Aramaic teachings of Yeshua, Jesus. And this book, I don't know whether you can see it, but this was one of the first that he brought out. And it's Prayers of the Cosmos, meditations on the Aramaic words of Jesus. I can't recommend this highly enough. I first read this on a flight to New York, and I tell you, it just, wow, talk about Hinduism opening my mind when I was very much younger, studying theology. This absolutely blew my mind inside out. This is phenomenal. So Neil has done huge research into Middle Eastern languages. He spent a lot of time with the Sufis, and on it goes. The Syriac language is still spoken by some in the Middle East. And Neil tells us that the major traditions of the Middle East, so what we call the Abrahamics, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, probably stem from the same source and language. All, now this is very, very important, all originally called God El or Al, which means that or the one. Nothing about Father here. From this root rises the sacred name Elat, which is Old Canaanite, Elohim, which is Hebrew, Allaha, which is Aramaic, and Allah, which is Arabic. The Lord's Prayer, as we have it today, is nothing like what Yeshua taught his disciples. Now, this Aramaic, if you do get hold of this book, you will discover that in Aramaic, the words have layers and layers of meaning. And so when it came to choosing what on earth to put in my little book, Neil and I came to an agreement because there was too much to put in. So we've taken one version. And of course, it would have been chanted, not read. Any of you who have seen Jewish men, for example, at the Western Wall, chanting their prayers, and it's a body prayer, and they are rocking with it. They're putting their whole being into it. Now, my Aramaic is not brilliant, but I'm going to give it a go. I'm going to try and chant this for you. And I hope you will feel some energy from it. So bear with me. As I say, my Aramaic is not brilliant, but I'm going to try my best. Abu Dwashmaya Nis Kadashmak Tete Malkuta Nechwei Sebiana Haikana da Boashmaya Arfa Haulan Lachma Tsum Kwananya Omana Washpoklan Kai bein wachtahein I kanadapknan Shwokwan Lahaya Bei Wela Tachlan Nesiuna Ella Patsan Min Bisha Metol de Lachi Malkuta Wachela Watesh Puchta Lachla Melmin The first word, Abuun. I think it's a little like Aum. You've all heard that one. Aum. Abuun. Here's one version of what it means. O Bertha, Father, Mother of the cosmos, you create all that moves in light. Focus your light within us. Make it useful as the rays of a beacon show the way. Create your reign of unity now through our fiery hearts and willing hands. Your one desire then acts with ours, as in all light, so in all forms. Grant what we need each day in bread and insight, subsistence for the call of growing life. Loose the cords of mistakes binding us as we release the strands we hold of others' guilt. Do not let us enter into forgetfulness, but free us from unripeness. From you is born all ruling will, the power and the life to do the song that beautifies all. From age to age, it renews. Truly, power to these statements. May they be the source from which all my actions grow, sealed in trust and faith. Amen. Now, I don't know about you, but I think that's a little bit different to what we have been given in the Lord's Prayer that is used in Western churches. I think they want to get back to the original, to the Aramaic, and find out, what did he really teach? And the more that you read about the Aramaic teachings of Jesus, they are profound. And I promise you, they fit in quite nicely with theosophical teachings. Now then, the next topic that I looked at was reincarnation. All of you know an awful lot about this. We know that forms of life manifest here and elsewhere. They are temporal, but the life itself, the spirit or the essence, is everlasting. Now, this is important. So it particularizes itself as the individual human, as an individual unit of consciousness. And this unit unfolds its spiritual powers by successively assuming physical bodies, passing through birth to death to birth many times. We know this, we're aware of it. The nature of the individual in each incarnation, his or her personality and circumstances are determined by the individual's actions and experiences in previous lives. We're familiar with that. And we know that the law of karma, the law of action and reaction, and it is a just law. We create it ourselves. Now, I don't think I need to spend too much on that. You can look at the Bhagavad Gita, you can go to the Upanishads, and I can give you quotes from all these different Hindu teachings, scriptures, which emphasize all of this, yeah? But what about other religions? Well, if I go into Buddhism, you're not going to be surprised there, are you? You know that Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha of this age, Buddha Shakyamuni, he of course grew up as a Hindu. So he would have learned the Hindu teachings. So what on earth happened with Buddha? What was going on here? And those of you who know the stories of the Buddha of this age, then he encountered certain things, didn't he, that distressed him. And it was witnessing what all of us fear, if we admit it: old age, sickness, death. They cannot be avoided. They are part of the samsaric condition. Here we are. Buddha said, this is the realm of unsatisfactoriness. There's always a fly in the ointment. There's always something that's going to go wrong. And yet, in this dimension of samsara, this realm where there is suffering, but there is also joy, we have the opportunity, apparently, to grow spiritually. This is where we learn. Well, so at the time of Buddha, then, Indian thought was the soul, the Atman, is trapped in samsara. And the Buddha, in his quest, and I don't need to go into all that because you know the story, it took him a long time, and he did suffer and he did struggle. And then he heard a musician, did he not, with a student. And the teacher is saying to the student, if the string is too tight, it'll snap. If the string is too slack, it won't play. And he suddenly realized, wow, it's somewhere in the middle. It's somewhere in the middle. Avoid the extremes. Come on, we must find somewhere in the middle. And so, you know the remarkable stories of his awakening, where he touches the ground as his witness. And he said, I mean, I'm not going to go into the Eightfold Path and all the rest of it, but I'm going to bring it down into a simplistic message. And he said, by transforming greed, hatred, and ignorance into non-attachment, compassion, and wisdom, every human being, every person is capable of finding release from suffering. There they are. That's the essence of it. And in his Noble Eightfold Path, he explained the importance of wisdom, morality, and meditation. And according to the Buddha, following the Noble Path is like entering a dark room with a light in your hand. Suddenly, the darkness will be cleared away and the room will be filled with light, and we'll be able to see where we're going without stumbling. There it is. Now then, okay. So there's an interesting thing here, though. Whereas Hindus talk about reincarnation, Buddhists use a slightly different terminology, and they talk about rebirth. It's slightly different. So if I can try and explain it simplistically, if you imagine one life is caused by the next in the same way, imagine this, that a flame from a candle causes a second flame. The two flames are not the same, but the first provides the cause for the second. So the person in one life is both continuous with, yet different from the person in the next life. Okay, so that's an important thing in Buddhism. We can experience this continuity within our own lives as well, within a lifespan. We die to the last moment and are reborn into this moment, and it's an ongoing process of constant change and connectedness through causation. I'm sure you've come across this. We create our own futures. You know that. You're aware of it. Buddhists call this dependent arising or interdependent origination. Yeah? I remember saying that to my last headmaster, and he didn't know what on earth I was on about. He'd never heard of it. So I told him to go look it up. Now, okay. We're not surprised to find these ideas of reincarnation or rebirth in Hinduism and Buddhism, linking up with what Theosophy teaches us. Well, what about, okay, let's have a few surprises. Would you expect to find this in Islam? Surely not. Nah, it's not going to be there, is it? Isn't it? Okay. Let's see what you make of this. You ask any imam or any Muslim now, and they'll say, no, 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 no. Islam rejects the idea of reincarnation. Okay. What about Surah 2:28 in the Holy Quran? What do you make of this? Listen carefully. God generates beings and sends them back over and over again till they return to him. How can you make denial of Allah, who made you live again when you died and will make you dead again and then alive again until you finally return to him? I don't know about you, but when I saw that in the Holy Quran, I thought, well, that sounds rather like reincarnation to me. What on earth? And then, of course, the mystics. You all know of Jalal al-Din Rumi, the wonderful Persian poet, the mystic, 13th century. The Sufis, I've got a personal link with the Sufis. They're wonderful, wonderful people. They consider themselves to be the custodians of the true teaching of their prophet, which they understood to advocate universal brotherhood of all human beings, by the way, everyone. Self-righteous Muslims, of course, have denounced them as heretics. This sort of thing does happen. And in response, the Sufis warned their fellow Muslims of the dangers of religious intolerance. Good on them. And then I bring you back to Rumi, who wrote this, and this I find, wow, listen to this. Like grass, I have grown over and over again. I passed out of mineral form and lived as a plant. From plant, I was lifted up to be an animal. Then I put away the animal form and I took on a human shape. Why should I fear that if I died, I shall be lost? Excuse me? That sounds very much like Theosophy to me. Am I right? I think so. After Rumi's death, of course, you know, his followers founded the Mevlevi order. You may know them as the whirling dervishes. And some of you came to the Peace Mala Interfaith ceremony at Llandaf Cathedral. I know Janet and Tony were there. And you will remember the extraordinary spiritual energy that came from that whirling dervish under the great majestus of Christ in the middle of the cathedral. It was so powerful. Okay, now then, so there's a couple of things to think about there. We could debate this with a learned Islamic scholar and see what have they got to say about that. What about Judaism? I have a dear friend who's an Orthodox Jew, and when I first introduced this idea to Norma, she's senior trustee on the board of trustees of the Peace Mala charity. And when I first mentioned this to Norma, she said, "Oh no, we don't have that in Judaism." So I think she's relaxed a little over the years because I've presented a few things to her to think about. So, okay, let's say then modern Orthodox Judaism definitely rejects the possibility of reincarnation. Okay. Strangely though, traditional Jewish services feature prayers. Now, what on earth is this all about? Asking for forgiveness for sins committed in both the present life and in previous incarnations. Pardon? What on earth? Jewish mystics, and of course the Kabbalists, you know of them, they accept reincarnation. The mystics always do. And according to the Zohar, which they think was compiled in 80 CE, eventually published by Rabbi Moses de Leon in 1280, says this, quote, "All souls are subject to the trials of transmigration, and men do not know the designs of the Most High with regard to them. They do not know how many transmigrations and mysterious trials they must undergo." Wow, what's that all about? According to Kabbalistic tradition, each human soul is a spark of the divine, which acquired bodies of increasing density during its descent into matter. Each individual comprises 4 elements: a physical body, a psyche, a vital soul, and the divine spark. That's interesting, isn't it? And then here is something that really, wow, when I discovered this. Rabbi Yonason Gershom, based in America, he published a book, Beyond the Ashes, Cases of Reincarnation from the Holocaust. And within the Hasidic tradition of Eastern Orthodoxy, belief in reincarnation, it's there. it's believed in. It just is. They don't question it. Isaac Luria, a 16th century rabbi, one of the greatest Jewish mystics of all time, taught reincarnation. And as did Israel ben Eliezer. He's also known as Baal Shem Tov, and he founded the Hasidic movement. So no question, they believed in it. They believe in it. And this is an interesting thing too. There's a Lubavitcher version of the Hasidic prayer, a bedtime prayer, in which the supplicant asks for forgiveness. Anyone who has angered or vexed me in this incarnation or any other. Pardon? What's going on here? In his book, Rabbi Gershom relates several case histories of people who have vivid, haunting memories of a past life during the Holocaust, causing phobias and other symptoms in their current life. Most are from cases of people who were born in the 1940s and 1950s. And Rabbi Gershom, in his book, he gives reasons why these souls rushed back to experience an earthly incarnation again. So that's Judaism, right? What about Christianity? What about Christianity? Oh, dear, dear. I tell you what, the Christian church has really hidden, buried, and mucked up a lot of stuff. Right. Reincarnation of the old prophets was in the minds of Jews at the time of Yeshua, Jesus. In fact, the followers of Jesus thought that he was a reincarnated prophet. And the Jews at that time, of course, were awaiting the arrival of the Messiah, whose appearance would be announced by the prophet Elias or Elijah. And some of you may remember the story from the Gospel of Matthew, where Jesus is in Caesarea Philippi in the north of Israel. And he asks his followers and he says, who do people say I am? What are people saying about me? Who do they think I am? And the answer they give to Jesus, Jesus, by the way, referred to himself as the Son of Man. It's interesting. This business of Son of God and one and only, that's another issue to look in that's been a bit messed around, okay? It has. Never mind. We leave that for now. But anyway, the answer that was given to Jesus was this. They say, well, some say thou art John the Baptist, because of course he'd already been decapitated. You know that awful story. Some are saying you're Elias. Some think you might be Jeremiah or one of the early prophets. Right, what on earth is going on there? That really is intriguing. When we come to the Christian church as we know it after the time of Jesus, all sorts of things start happening. It always happens, doesn't it? But in the very, very beginnings, reincarnation was a core concept. It was there, definitely. And a number of the early church fathers believed in, and they wrote about it. So we've got Justin Martyr from 100 to 165 AD. He expressly stated that that the soul inhabits more than one human body. So there's Justin Martyr. Then we have Origen from 185 to 254 AD. He was considered by Saint Jerome as the greatest teacher of the church after the apostles. And he defended the idea that the soul exists before the body, and this is a fundamental concept of reincarnation taught in the early church. Then we've got another early church father, Saint Gregory, Bishop of Nyssa, and he wrote, it is absolutely necessary that the soul should be healed and purified. And if this does not take place during life, its life on earth, it must be accomplished in future lives. The soul is immaterial and invisible in nature, and at one time puts off one body and exchanges it for a second. There you are. That's Saint Gregory. He also wrote, every soul comes into this world strengthened by the victories or weakened by the defeats of its previous life. So we have Saint Augustine also taught reincarnation. And then I've got others. I mean, in my little book, I say a bit more about this, but we have Synesius, the Bishop of Ptolemais, taught it. St. Ambrose taught about it. Pope Gregory I taught about it. Jerome, St. Athanasius, St. Basil, St. John Chrysostom, St. Gregory of Nazianzus, Clement of Alexandria, they all taught it. Well, if that's the case, this was, for certain, the mainstream view of Christianity. But all of you know that it became a huge issue and the belief was made illegal because Emperor Constantine believed it was dangerous to the empire to believe in reincarnation. It was finally banished from the teachings of the church by Emperor Justinian. In 545 CE, he was able to apply the full power of Rome and his authority to stop the belief in reincarnation. He forced the ruling cardinals to draft a papal decree stating that anyone who believes that souls come from God and return to God will be punished by death. Oh dear. And then, of course, we have the whole rumpus around Oregon, which I'm sure many of you are aware of. The actual decree then came out and said this: if anyone asserts the fabulous pre-existence of souls and shall assert the monstrous restoration which follows from it, let him be anathema. So this was the against Oregon, and this was attached to the decrees of the Fifth Ecumenical Council in 545 in Nicene and the post-Nicene Fathers. Now, the Pope at the time was Pope Vigilius, and he apparently refused to sign the papal decree condemning Oregon's teachings on reincarnation. And as a result of his disobedience, the emperor had the Pope arrested and slung into jail. And then in 543, Justinian convoked the Fifth General Council of the Church and told the Pope, you will sign this. You will sign this. Whatever the council decides into doctrine, you will sign it. And apparently on the way there, under guard, the Pope escaped to avoid being forced to condemn Oregon's writings. Well, the emperor commanded the council to continue despite the Pope's refusal to attend. So what does it mean when it says monstrous restoration? So this passage is aimed straight at the teachings handed down from Yeshua himself, i.e. Jesus, the Christ, to his disciples, that mankind came from God and was destined to become one with God as he was one with God. Apparently, Jesus and his disciples spoke of ascending to heaven in spirit after having discarded the physical body. And you are aware of the Gnostic Gospels, I'm sure, where it is written that Jesus appeared to his followers in a spirit form to prove that there is something beyond death. Later, of course, selective editing of the Gospels and those with vested interests took this to mean physical resurrection. They've misunderstood completely. Some will go so far as to say that this is an invention of the church and is contrary to the teachings of Jesus. A lot is being written at the moment by theologians I know, and I've read 2 books and said what I think about it. It's going to cause a storm, but it's about time. It's about time that the truth was shared. Origen's writings then, which had been perceived as profound spiritual wisdom for 3 centuries. After this palaver, they were now considered heresy. And for these reasons, Origen was never canonized by either the Catholic or the Orthodox churches. How sad is that? Worse still, his texts written about the subject were deliberately destroyed. Are we surprised? No, I'm not. Many Christians today have absolutely no idea that reincarnation was an early Christian belief. And with the condemnation of Origen, so much that is implied then in reincarnation was officially stigmatized as heresy, and that the possibility of a direct confrontation with this belief was effectively removed from the church. In dismissing Origen from its midst, the church only indirectly addressed itself to the issue of reincarnation. And to this very day, the church still rejects belief in reincarnation. There is one exception, and that is the liberal Catholic Church, who of course embrace the teachings. Okay, what happens after death? Now we're entering into Tim Wyatt's area. Tim has done so much fabulous research on this and has brought out another amazing book. So what happens? Oh, wow. Well, what does Theosophy tell us? Okay, life is an expression of spirit, endlessly manifesting in form, and being alternates with non-being according to the universal cyclic law. This is Theosophy talking. Man's body dies, his soul, the psychic mechanism of consciousness between body and spirit is also temporal. The term soul, that's a little bit of a problem with that, but let's leave it for now, designates the thinking, feeling self of everyday experience. Can we accept that? Housed in the physical body, and it is mortal like that body. We would call it the personality, right? The individualized spirit, though, persists. Spirit alone, described as a spark or a ray of the divine life, is immortal. This is the enduring individuality. Death is to be seen as a process rather than an event. At first, the after-death state is a process where the experience of the past life is assimilated. The etheric double, now separated from its physical companion, gradually disintegrates and the entity passes into the Kama Loka. And then follows the second death, when all temporal elements are left behind and the entity passes into Devachan, the land of the gods, condition of mental bliss. And here the ego enjoys a restorative state until ready for a new earth life. We know this belief is strongly in the Hindu teachings. You've only got to go to the Bhagavad Gita, within the Mahabharata, and there we are. And remember what was shared between Arjuna and Lord Krishna before the battle. And we have that wonderful, well, I'll just share it with you. Never was the spirit born. The spirit shall cease to be, never. Never was time, it was not. End and beginning are dreams. Birthless and deathless and changeless remaineth spirit forever. Death hath not touched it at all. Death through the house of it seems. Now, in Buddhist teachings, particularly Tibetan, we have some very profound and complicated explanations of what is going on. So, following death, according to the Tibetan traditions, the spirit of the departed goes through a process lasting 49 days. Practicing Buddhists will do special mantras for the departed over the period of those 49 days to help the departed person who is in a series of what they call bardos. So the first one, the Chikai Bardo, the bardo of dying, begins at death, and that lasts from apparently half a day or even up to 4 days. This is the period of time necessary for the departed to realize that they are no longer in their physical body. And sometimes people don't realize that they're dead. Okay, they just don't know. The consciousness of the departed then has an ecstatic experience of what Buddhists call the primary clear white light. And this happens at the death moment. And every one of us apparently gets at least a fleeting glimpse of this light. The more spiritually developed we are, apparently, we will see it for longer. And we are able to go beyond it into a higher level of reality. Most of us, though, apparently drop into the lesser state of the secondary clear light. So the second stage, the Chonid Bardo, the bardo of luminous mind, the departed encounters many hallucinations, and all sorts of things appear that are related to the karma that we have created in our lives. And unless a person is highly developed spiritually, you may feel that you are still in your body. The departed then, as I say, will encounter various apparitions. Within Tibetan traditions, they'll say peaceful and wrathful deities can appear. And these are actually personifications of human feelings that to successfully achieve nirvana, the deceased must encounter unflinchingly. I wonder how many of us can do that. I think we'd be terrified of stuff that'll appear, goodness knows. And only the most evolved individuals can skip this bardo experience altogether and transit directly into a paradise realm. And then there's the next bardo, stage 3, the bardo of rebirth. And so begins the process of reincarnation. I go on in the book to talk about the Tibetan Buddhist wheel of life and death. I'm not going to go into that. What about Judaism? Jews do believe in life beyond this world, but they are more concerned about life here and now. And so whatever they have to say about life beyond, it's a bit vague. There isn't a great deal there. But I found this interesting, that rabbis teach that the soul apparently leaves the body while a person is asleep. That's interesting, isn't it? And visits the heavenly realms for refreshment. And apparently during Shabbat, that's the holy day of the week, which starts at sunset on Friday and ends at sunset Saturday, during Shabbat, the Almighty apparently gives everyone an extra soul. And I checked that with my Jewish friend, and she said, yes, that's true. That is our belief. If you look at the Old Testament, it's a bit vague again. Some of you might remember the stories of the prophet Samuel and being called up from Sheol by the witch of Endor. It's all a bit vague. It's not terribly clear. There is something in the book of Daniel where it is quoted, many of those who sleep in the dusty earth will awaken. These for everlasting life, these for shame, and others for everlasting abhorrence. So there you go. And if we go over to Christianity, again, it's not very clear. There's a lot of confusion here. And I don't know about the rest of you, but whenever I have attended a Christian funeral, you have the priest saying something about, and I suppose they're referring to physical resurrection, that the departed is now at sleep, is the suggestion, until the end of days or something like that. And then in the next breath, I've heard priests saying that the departed person will now be joining other members of the family who have gone on before them. So it really is very, very confusing. They haven't got a clear picture at all of what on earth is going on, except that they do believe that death is not the end. And of course, the resurrection of Jesus or his spiritual manifestations afterwards prove that death is not the end. But it is terribly confused. It really is not clear. We have some Christians who will talk about hell, and we'll have others who will talk about purgatory, some sort of in between. And oh, good grief. It's really a muddle and a mess, as far as I'm concerned. Very, very confused. And then, of course, there's this idea of the parousia, the second coming, that Jesus will return at the end of time. Not all Christians agree with that. They have different ways of interpreting it. So there's a lot of confusion, an awful lot of confusion within the Christian tradition. I'm going to touch on Islam, and I'm coming to the end of what I want to share with you. I'm conscious of the time. Traditional Islam will say, right, death is the complete end of physical life, and it's a beginning of a period of rest until the day of resurrection, when Allah judges the living and the dead. Some Christians agree with that as well. Many Muslims believe that the righteous are able to see visions of God after death. I don't know what God looks like. I wonder what on earth they mean by that. And that the wicked will see visions of hell. Ooh, not very encouraging, is it? Except for these possible visions of heaven or hell, Muslims believe the soul remains in a kind of sleep soul until Judgment Day. The Sufis have got it a little different. Thank God. So the Sufi masters teach that after death, a person judges himself, thereby bringing about their own heaven or hell. Sufism, also known as the way of the heart and the way of the pure. And it means that one can move from the lower level of self to ascend to the divine light that penetrates the entire universe. This light concept is common to many other religions, and many of us now know about these near-death experiences, and Tim, of course, has written a lot about that. I have a personal friend, Dr. Penny Satori, who did her doctorate on near-death and out-of-the-body experiences. And it's absolutely astonishing and fascinating what Penny discovered. And also, some of you may have heard of an amazing neurosurgeon, an American, Dr. Eben Alexander, and I've been in touch with him as well. He's a very eminent American neurosurgeon, and in his book, Proof of Heaven, if you haven't read it, do. He describes astonishing, truly astonishing experiences when he fell into a coma after suffering a rare form of bacterial meningitis. He shouldn't have survived, but he did. And I think I'll leave it there, Erica. I think I've spoken enough.